church. So, I take church to the jail on Tuesdays with Brenda. Yeah. So actually, I've been trying to go before. Yeah. We were going to we're connected with the semester. So we're trying to get on committee. They want us to go on Tuesday for church. But I wanted to talk to Brenda first before we did that. I didn't want to step on her toes.
I think only one time on 8
Yeah.
and so that would still be like 3 Tuesdays out of there.
Yeah. See, we were just wondering time because I was like, I don't know what time. They get 60. I'm like, I'll call Brenda. But I wouldn't know what older. So
Yeah, 60. And then, like I said, all of the county comes in after us except for that round.
yeah, that's why
AA and NA switch months.
yeah.
And so
But I was like 3 and 7. Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, it's fire. So like, 100%. I'll send you all the yeah, but I was like, yeah, no, so we're open for long term. Is that the one that's on up by Davidson? No. Okay. So we have property up over on the drive by the water tower, right across. So but there's yeah, the big water tower, and then there's a right that you can take to go down into that neighborhood. Water, yeah, past McCauley. If you're headed towards the, it's right up at the top of that hill, right at the bend. All of that property at the right of the bend is ours. And so it'll be a 12 to 18 month long term house tour. All this. Yeah, she went to the challenge, and she was like, they did great. Yeah,
and so when I lived in Arizona, I took a week. So
yeah.
it was just imagine, like it was really huge. It was a big part of just my recovery, and that's what I wanted to do today. And that was immediately nothing like
It's not. It is.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Well, good morning and welcome to CASPER College's annual Social and Behavioral Sciences Seminar. I'm Dr. Nathan Blank, Interim Dean of the school, and I'm honored to open today's program, Empower Change, Turn Struggle into Strength. Thank you to our speakers, students, faculty, staff, industry partners, and community members for joining us today. This morning, we'll hear about recovery, resilience, and practical tools to overcome addiction, regain ownership of our lives, and regain ownership over our lives. This afternoon's living room conversation, held in recognition of Constitution Day, will explore the intersections of mental health, addiction, incarceration, and how we can preserve both safety and robust civic exchange. On the topic of robust civic exchange, I want to acknowledge a painful event that occurred a week ago today, just 6 hours from here, the killing of Charlie Kirk at UVU. Like all of you, I'm still processing what happened and what it means for civil discourse. That attack has shocked the nation and reminded us in the most tragic terms that escalating polarization, growing hostility, dehumanization, and the erosion of civic norms, in the worst cases, can lead to violence. We mourn with those affected, and we condemn political violence in all its forms. As we have discussed at this seminar before, we must learn to disagree without being disagreeable. This is not an isolated flare-up. Recent national data show troubling increases in how some young people say they view violence as an acceptable response to speech. a trend that should concern every educator, campus leader, student, and American. In the most recent survey from the Foundation of Individual Rights and Expression, roughly 1 in 3 college students said they find violence at least rarely acceptable in response to a campus speech or speaker, a sharp rise from only 1 in 5 in 2020. This is a moment for sober reflection and resolve, not finger-pointing. Last week, Utah Governor Spencer Cox urged people to choose a different path when he said, "Your generation has an opportunity to build a culture very different from what we are suffering through now, not by pretending differences don't matter, but by embracing our differences and having those hard conversations." So why are we here today? Because the work we do, teaching evidence-based approaches to addiction, providing compassionate support for mental health, and modeling civil, constructive conversation builds healthier, safer campuses and communities. We have to empower change by turning struggle into strength. That is what higher education does. Our speakers today bring both lived experience and research-based tools. Listen deeply, ask honest questions, and leave today committed to helping yourself and others overcome addiction, reclaim potential, and foster respectful dialogue, both in person and online. This event has been a year in the making, and I'm excited for you to see what we have for you today. Now I'd like to introduce Professor Douglas Hall, our MC, and he will introduce our first keynote speaker.
Good morning. Gotta scroll to the top. Welcome to the Social Behavioral Sciences Seminar, Empowering Change. It's such a privilege to see this room filled with people who share a commitment to growth, to learning, and to building stronger lives and communities. Today, we'll hear speakers who bring not only deep expertise, but also lived experience, compassion, and a passion for transformation. Together, they'll challenge us to think differently about the stories we tell ourselves, the science of addiction and recovery, and the way trauma can be reframed into resilience, and how personal choice and inner strength can change the world around us. We've put together a lineup today designed to speak to the head and to the heart, to give us both knowledge and inspiration, and just as importantly, to send us home with tools we can actually use. So settle in, open your notebooks, and open your minds, and let's get started with our first keynote speaker of the day. Our first keynote speaker this morning is Dr. Kevin McCauley, Senior Fellow at Meadows Behavioral Healthcare. Dr. McCauley has built a national reputation for taking the complex science of addiction and making it clear, memorable, and even a little entertaining. Many of you may know his acclaimed film, Pleasure Unwoven, where he uses humor and vivid metaphor to explain the neurobiology of addiction. Today, he brings us an updated and important message in his presentation, the Dopamine Hypothesis. Dr. McCauley will guide us through how dopamine drives motivation, learning, and addiction, and how new intoxicants, from cannabinoids to psychedelics to synthetics, are reshaping the landscape of risk and recovery. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kevin McCauley.
Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to be back with you in CASPER. The last time I was here was for the eclipse, and it was just a great way to enjoy something that was going on all over the whole planet here in CASPER. I love to go to small towns. I haven't lectured, but I've been to almost every corner of every state in this country. And one of the things that I've found very, very moving along that time is how individual communities were coping with the expansion in mortality that hit us started hitting us about 15 years ago. And how they brought the values of that community to bear upon the problem, how they made their solution. And I've learned a lot, but what I'd like to talk about today is basically the lecture that I do for our clients. We have at any one time about 450 spread out over about 11 programs. And so my job is to basically go to each program once a month and do the neuroscience of addiction and the neuroscience of recovery. That's important because there are two, not just the problem, but the solution. And I'm not sure if it's an adult job, but I enjoy it, and I've been doing it for a long time. And when you do 10,000 hours of something, you start to get a pretty good feel for what people respond to, what they cannot hear about the neuroscience of addiction, because there is that. My wife says I have the most boring job in the world because I just do the same lecture over and over again. That's not the way I see it, because every group is different. They ask different questions in different orders. And so it's always interesting to see how people encounter this information. I think that learning the neuroscience of addiction can be a major part of a person's treatment, or if they don't necessarily take on formal treatment, then at least their journey into recovery, knowing that there really are brain chemistry reasons behind the things that we do. I think that can be a real important milestone. So just a few housekeeping things. This is my email. This is the only thing you need to know. If you have this, then you can email me, and I can send you the slides that we're doing today. I tried to write a lecture, specifically for you. I can send you those slides, or I can send you the link to the Dropbox that I keep for our clients and their families. It has what I think are the most important current publications about addiction. You'll find in there my most recently updated version of what I call the periodic table of the intoxicants, and you can just download a high definition PDF of it. Feel free to print it out. I do have a few posters left if anyone wants a giant poster. But this is my way, my silly way of kind of understanding what is the key hypothesis that is still used, at least in the neuroscience of addiction, at least in the medicine of addiction, and that's the dopamine hypothesis. The dopamine hypothesis would be the entry point into learning about the serotonin hypothesis and the cannabinoid hypothesis and the opioid hypothesis. All of those things then branch out, but the dopamine hypothesis is important, and it hasn't really changed that much in the 30 years that I've been trying to figure out my own addiction. So you'll find that in there, and you'll also find the links to those two films. I made them a long time ago. They're kind of silly, kind of amateurish. I can't watch them, they're too painful. I figured that they would only be out there for a few years, and then someone would come along and make a better film. But believe it or not, they've kind of stuck around. And the first one is really about what goes wrong in the brain, and the second one, which I think is a much happier message, what is it that we know really predicts success in getting people through their first year of recovery. So if those are tools for you as you strike out and try to carry the message of recovery to your patients, to people that you know and love, that would make me very happy. I generally at our program start with this slide because we have, I would say, about a fifth to a third of our patients, depending on the program, do not have substance use disorder. They don't carry that diagnosis in the problem list. And so they kind of are a little insulted that they have to sit through a lecture on addiction. But the point I'm trying to make colorfully with this slide is that addiction is a strange disorder in that it has multiple etiologies. Usually most disorders have one etiology, maybe a complex etiology, but there are lots of different pathways into this, and some people take more than one. And so what I try to explain is that even if a person is not here, but they're here, what they need to understand is that by being here, they are many times at greater risk of ever developing this. For instance, if a person has major depressive disorder, I think it's important for them to understand that opioids work differently in depressed people. They are antidepressants themselves. And so that innocent Vicodin prescription carries a lot more risk than it would for a normal person. And I think that that's an important thing to know and to be aware of. And sometimes warned is forearmed, and you can prevent the progression of this ever to get to here. The same thing is true for trauma. I kind of made these little double arrows here because we're really talking about an insult to the dopamine system, the striatal dopamine system in the brain. This is the system that we were all born with, and we come into the world and it's fragile. And it's especially susceptible to certain toxic exposures. And if that occurs, then it sort of opens the door for a host of different dopamine disorders, one of them being ADHD. So if a person is exposed to an adverse early life adversity, and I'm sure you've heard of adverse childhood experiences, that opens the door to this, and that opens the door to that. And before you know it, you've got a real fertile soil for an intoxicant should it come along. The fact that there are so many intoxicants that can serve as powerful forms of self-medication, that's I think, something that folks need to understand. This is the pathway that I took into addiction. I came to it fairly late in life, which is probably one reason why I'm alive. The earlier a person is exposed to an intoxicant, the greater the risk of them developing substance use disorder as they get into adulthood. Now, when I was in medical school, we did not think that this pathway was possible. We didn't think it was possible to create addiction if you were treating legitimate pain with a prescribed opioid, and today we recognize that that's a major thoroughfare into the diagnosis of opioid use disorder, because, again, people carry different vulnerabilities, different risks for that innocent 20 tablets or even 10 tablets of Vicodin. At the time, I was in the Navy when I developed this problem. I was part of that generation that saw Top Gun and said, I want to do that. And I managed to, not in the front seat, but in the back seat. So I was the flight surgeon for a Marine Corps training squadron for the F-18 Hornet. Now they use a different aircraft. But this was a wonderful time in my life. I absolutely enjoyed it. Pilots are a fascinating group of patients, very charismatic. They hate doctors, so you've already got kind of an interesting clinical situation. And we were a training squadron, so we had about 3 times the number of planes that most squadrons have. And as you can see, some of them were 2-seaters, so the flight surgeon could get as much time as he or she wanted. And it was very exciting. I will be honest with you, I spent most of my time either throwing up or unconscious back there. It was never really all that prep. Filled up a lot of gloves. This is the Navy wants anyone who affects the career of a naval aviator or a Marine Corps or Coast Guard aviator to have an experience as an aviator, or at least flying themselves. And so that's why they put me there. The Navy and the Marine Corps are the only ones that really do that to the extent that they do. And so everything was going great. And I can't say I had any depression or trauma. I passed my background check, got my secret clearance. I was in a very, very good relationship with my nation, and then something happened. I got exposed. I got exposed to these opioids after a surgery. So in a sense, I'm the first person who became addicted to opioids. I'm the first patient that I ever met that became addicted to opioids after a surgery, when in fact I was meeting those patients all the time. We just weren't conscious of it. And so without getting into the ugly details, within about 6 months I had a pretty severe intravenous Demerol problem, and that is not consistent with this duty. And I understood that, and I was desperate to stop, and I couldn't. And that was the first time that I hadn't been able to do something that I put my mind to. And so, we do certain things to try to slow ourselves down, and they just kind of accelerate the problem that much more. So at the time in California, you need a triplicate prescription pad to prescribe Schedule II opioids. So I ripped all of mine up, thinking that would solve the problem, and I just found a way to pilfer it from the branch clinic pharmacy. And I got caught, and people were pissed, as you can imagine. People lose their mind a little bit when a healthcare professional is discovered to be diverting medications, especially if they're diverting them from patients. So you really want to have something that's written out ahead of time, a flow chart that you can go through. And that just didn't occur at that time. And so the Navy sent me to their treatment center for drug addicts. They had one back then. They had their own Betty Ford Center back then. It's called Leavenworth. And I found myself sitting in the basement of our nation's maximum security prison wondering, gee, how the hell did I get here? And when you go from the backseat of an F-18 Hornet to solitary confinement, it kind of gets your attention. And so it got my attention, and I desperately wanted to know the answer to this question. Now, this is a long time ago. I'm happy to say that we have active duty members at our programs today. So people aren't going to the Brig or to Leavenworth the way they were, and that's good. We've all come a long way in 30 years. But the idea that things could deteriorate so quickly, and that there was this opportunity for this particular form of trauma to form, which is called moral injury, which is when a person is suddenly confronted with the fact that they've dramatically violated their own professional standards, their own moral standards. That is something that we deal with a lot too. And where the role of comedy should come in all of this is something that I've evolved. What's interesting about that period of early sobriety is that the brain is kind of shut down as it needs to kind of get around things like personal values and people. The brain sort of sheds its outer layers of consciousness because those things are in the way. And you got to get rid of those things if you're gonna, get the job at hand done, which is for maintaining contact with the particular intoxicant. And so when a person enters early recovery, they're a little protected from the full realization of what they've had to do to become addicted. And so for the first couple of years, generally my way of dealing with this was comedy. I'm Irish, it's kind of what we do. A comic premise is. A comic premise is, the way a situation sets itself up to yield comedy. So like a documentary crew goes to a regular office and films people. That's the comic premise of The Office. And so idiot doctor, drug addict goes to military prison. I mean, come on, the jokes write themselves. So, I got a million of them, and they definitely tend to break the ice. But it was like 10 years into my recovery, and people would come up and they were, rude, but they said, wow, you're really joking about some pretty serious things. And at first I was kind of insulted, this is my story, I'll use it however I want to. But again, as we get deeper into recovery, the brain starts to come back on. And the full realization of what happened starts to hit us. And this is why we kill ourselves. If we don't have some kind of mechanism in place that can turn that shame into, for instance, helping another person. And this is, I would say, this is a third of our patients at any one time. People who've actually got good sobriety. They've achieved 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and they hit this wall. And sometimes that wall is unresolved childhood trauma, but a lot of it is, sort of unresolved moral injury. And so I don't really tell these jokes anymore. I did it for you because you're special, but I really, now I'm in this phase of my recovery where I really have to kind of absorb this moral injury. And I think that the neuroscience of addiction can go a long way to helping people with that. So you have to imagine, this is actually a picture of Alcatraz, but it looked almost exactly like that. I guess that was just standard prison design 150 years ago. So, mine looked like, Leavenworth looked like Alcatraz. And interestingly, when I tried to put this into a film, there are only a couple prisons that are now closed that allow you to do filming, and one of them is in Rawlins, Wyoming. So thank you to the state of Wyoming for allowing me to have that scene, basically create that scene. But you have to imagine me sitting in this cell, trying to get to the bottom of this question. And the neuroscience of addiction was just starting to come together at that point. There was one comprehensive textbook on addiction medicines called the Lowenson. This is my copy. My mother, who's also a physician, sent this. At first, they didn't want to give it to me. They didn't want it to leave the prison mailroom. I guess they thought I was going to make methamphetamine in my toilet bowl or something like that. But this is probably my most prized possession. It has my inmate number in it, and I just read that thing from cover to cover about 2 or 3 times. And the introduction to this textbook, which was also an op-ed in the New York Times, was written by the then director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse, his name is Alan Leshner, and he advanced the idea that addiction was a brain disease. And that was a very new idea in 1997. And I grabbed onto that and held onto it as tightly as I could. Because, you know, the idea that there were brain chemistry reasons behind this, that was very, very helpful. Now, his op-ed has become something of a lightning rod over the last few decades for people who are making very, very good arguments that addiction cannot be a brain disease. I love these arguments. They're very, very important. I believe that they can be defeated. That's a lecture for another time. That dopamine hypothesis that I read about in the Lowenson text has not changed all that much in the last 30 years. It got more complex. We realize it's much more, you know, in-depth explanation than we need to kind of absorb. But today, that has sort of morphed into what I would call the party line. This is our government's main publication on the neuroscience of addiction, and to its credit, it also talks about the neuroscience of recovery. It's a huge document, it takes me a couple days to get through, but it's an excellent summary of the neuroscience, at least up to 2016. But it's complex, and if I put slides like this on the board for people who are 3 days sober from heroin, it doesn't make me a lot of friends. So it's a great model. It's very important. It just rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it? Impaired responsive vision and salience attribution. But I think it's possible to summarize the neuroscience of addiction in 3 simple sentences. So if I had 3 or 4 minutes to try, and someone asked me, what is addiction? This is my little modular explanation. I'll try to get it done in time. If you know these 3 sentences, you really know most of the neuroscience of addiction. You'll have an excellent foundation, certainly. And this would be the first sentence. Something goes wrong in the brain's ability to construct a normal, pleasurable experience. So I'm already in trouble, all right, with the people who do this research. So I'm going to put that word pleasure in scare quotes, because what we are talking about is a problem in the dopamine system. And dopamine is not the same thing as pleasure. If I were to tell you that dopamine is the pleasure chemical, that's so inaccurate that it's really kind of wrong. What dopamine handles is an aspect of every pleasurable experience we have. I would say the core component of that pleasurable experience. In a sense, the brain has a value calculator. It can tell what in the environment is good for survival. It has to recognize those things, learn them, and then be able to predict them. And it uses the chemical dopamine to run this value calculator. Now, we'll get into this a little bit more, but what we now understand is that dopamine does not just handle rewarding things, it handles things that are extremely aversive. So when that person has that moment, that traumatic moment that will later consolidate into PTSD, that moment is dripping with dopamine, because this is the chemical that the brain uses to get its own attention and say, we are dealing with something that is extremely important for survival, good or bad. And that dopamine system has to be working perfectly for another system to work. And that's the system that we use to make choices. Free will, free agency, whatever you want to call it, that runs off that dopamine system. Now again, I'm going to use scare quotes around this word, because really I'm using the word choice to describe everything that the frontal cortex does. All of these things that we take for granted run off the quality of that dopamine signal coming from below. ADHD is an undersignaling up to the frontal cortex. We give medications that are specially and proprietarily formulated not to over-release dopamine, just to turn up dopamine tone, but people will discover that if you crush up Adderall and snort a whole bunch of it, that you get more dopamine than you should have. But the treatment of ADHD, especially in childhood, and there are more than medications that treat ADHD, is very, very important, because untreated childhood ADHD is a major risk factor for adult addiction. But that executive function, you know, my ability to make decisions that are well thought out, my ability to see how my behavior impacts the people around me, my ability to run my relationships, regulate my emotions, runs off of that. And if that fails, this goes next. So those, I think, are two important sentences to know about addiction. The third one involves the cause, right? Which it turns out is not genes. Genes are important. They're a big part of the story. Can't tell the story of addiction without at some point talking about genetics. But really, you have to have something in the environment, a toxin, an environmental toxin, if you like, and that is stress, but again, scare quotes, not normal stress. This is severe stress, needle pegging stress. This is not here and there stress. This is repetitive, almost systematic stress. This is stress that builds upon previous stressors that have already sensitized the system. This is stress that hits you when you're least expecting it. You're expecting to be nurtured, you're abandoned. You're expecting to be cared for, you're exploited, right? Those early life adversities, those adverse childhood experiences are very critical in the first 18 months of life for the lifetime operation of the dopamine system. And you're probably also familiar with the idea that trauma can be heritable. A lot more to learn about that, still, very, provocative idea, but there's enough science that we can start to go down that road. And this is why we can see the overlap of addiction with all of these other disorders. At some point, they're all using that dopamine wiring. So in a sentence, addiction is a stress-induced, genetically mediated defect in the reward learning system that uses the chemical dopamine to grab my attention and its partner glutamate to lay down a memory of that thing. Can you see that that's a problem in both intoxication and trauma? Way too much attention. Memories that are laid down are pathologically strong. And if you lose the reward learning system, the frontal cortex goes next, right? That's a very busy slide, but that's where we are right now, at least in medicine, at least in neuroscience, of our understanding of addiction. So again, the people doing this research might look a little askance at my 3 sentences, but I'm here to tell you, that'll do you good 97% of the time. If you just keep those in mind, you'll be able to solve a lot of problems going forward. So what I ask our patients is that the next time you have a pleasurable experience, we don't serve chocolate cake in our chow hall, but if you should take a piece of chocolate cake, and it's particular, and I went through hundreds of slides on Shutterstock to find the most delicious piece of chocolate cake I could. This is the winner. It looks pretty good to me. And so you take that piece of chocolate cake, you put it into your mouth, it's delicious, you say yum. The question I'd like you to consider is, how does the brain do yum? How does the brain construct a normal, pleasurable experience? Because it's several different areas of the brain working together. The process starts deep in this survival engine. Why engine? Because this thing is extremely efficient at ensuring the survival of whatever organism has it. And it hasn't changed that much over the millions of years of evolution. We can study his and learn a lot about ours, right? And when the brain comes across something that it recognizes as good for survival, it tags that thing and it uses the chemical dopamine to do that. So the cells here in the midbrain send their pathways up. They go to many different areas of the brain, but this mesolimbic pathway up to this area, the nucleus, that's the first part of the brain that is active as the brain begins the process of generating a much larger pleasurable experience that will include memories and emotions, and if this is grandma's chocolate cake, even a little attachment, all of those other systems, serotonin, cannabinoids, opioids, but it starts here in the dopamine system. So dopamine is just the first and will be a cascade of chemicals that will allow me to have that pleasurable experience. What you and I think of as pleasure is going to require all of this, all right? But, and so for liking something, I'm going to need a lot of different systems working together. What dopamine is just the drive to get that thing. And the person who did this research is named Kent Berridge at the University of Michigan. His words, I think, are extremely good at understanding the experience of people with addiction. It is possible to desperately, desperately want something that you have actually come to hate. And what you're looking at is the brain's ability to generate a hedonic experience starting to come unravel, right? But that's just the first step. The next step that comes online is the step that can lay down memory. So I have to lay down a memory of that thing, not just the cake, but everything that went along with it, the people, the time of day. Even the angle of the sun in the sky becomes part of that memory. And so now we're kind of one floor up, if you like, and now dopamine is starting to work with its partner glutamate to create these memories, and not just the memory of the thing, good or bad, for survival, but everything that went along with it, because we have to be able to predict this thing. And so this is where cues come in, right? This is the danger of cue-induced relapse. I tell our patients, you are going to leave here, this inpatient setting, this very artificial setting in the middle of the desert, and go home back to an environment that is laden with cues, right? Very emotional cues, invisible cues. So you need to have a plan for that first 72 hours, right? It doesn't happen a lot, but we do have people who do great in treatment, they leave treatment, their graduation is very emotional, and they drink on the plane ride home. And that is not a statement about their willingness or their sincerity, that's just bad discharge planning. That first 72 hours is a high risk time. And so I ask people, you need to plan it out hour by hour. You're gonna go to a meeting when you get home. What meeting? How are you getting there? Let's go through this. And if you can just get them through that, if someone goes home, I just did this for a Marine who actually got a bad conduct discharge, which was reversed later on, and had a real addiction problem. And I went with him back to Texas. Because he was, he definitely struck me as someone who was very fragile, and I know what that's like. So the next system that comes online is the stress system. So yet we're another floor up. Dopamine is held in check by the stress system, specifically this stress hormone called CRF, and they sort of do a push me, pull you against each other around a hedonic set point. And so if I challenge either side of this, they're going to affect each other. So let's say I go on a drinking binge and I release a massive amount of dopamine, my brain will push back with the stress system to restore homeostasis, to restore balance, and if it's just one drinking binge, balance is restored. But if I'm drinking every day, or if I've been serially exposed to chronic severe stressors, the system can get stuck. And that's where it starts to cause damage to a whole bunch of different areas of the brain and the body, right? Especially the immune system. Starting to understand more and more that the immune system is a stress receptor for the brain. And so after 30 years of trying to debunk this AA crap, never been able to do it, probably the most scientific reason I can give you for going to those dumb meetings and getting that annoying sponsor and working those steps is that those things are anti-inflammatory. That they squeak down the level of neuroinflammation in the brain, and it's the same inflammation that kills our fellow citizens with COVID who die from ARDS. It's just happening at a much longer period of time at a much lower level, right? And so the idea of mental illness as an inflammatory disorder that we need to pay attention to the body, right? That I think has real currency. There are immune therapies, like there's a drug called ibudilast. It is a cytokine blocker. It's an anti-interleukin 6 blocker, okay? And that drug has been shown to abort relapse in alcoholics. So it could be that those commercials that you see for plaque psoriasis and inflammatory bowel disorder, that those things actually might have some utility in keeping us sober at difficult moments. I think you can see where we're going. We're eventually reaching the frontal cortex, but all of these capacities, they rest upon the systems that came before, right? We can't understand what's going on in the frontal cortex unless we understand this. And so all of those capacities, they run off that dopamine signal. And so if I throw genes back in there, you can see it's complex. There are at least 5 different systems, maybe more, that we have to keep in mind if we want to decipher what we use to diagnose addiction, which is currently the criteria in the DSM-5. DSM has never loved the term addiction. The term that it's currently using is substance use disorder. You can see how even that is problematic. I'm starting to see more and more Addiction professionals just use the term use disorder. I think that's pretty awkward. I like the term addiction personally, but we don't, the DSM does not use the term addiction because when they did the DSM-2, addiction lost on the committee by 1 vote, right? So we can use these terms, but we're really talking about the same thing. And you know how it works. You only need 2 of these 11 to get on the map. That would be the mild end of substance use disorder. With each additional symptom, the severity increases. For people who have 6 or higher, that's the severe end. When we talk about the disease, the brain disease of addiction, we're talking about the severe end. I don't think disease really describes the less severe end, right? But if you take away the 2 that aren't very good really at capturing what addiction is, because there are blood pressure medications that cause tolerance and withdrawal, right? But you don't see people throwing bricks through pharmacy windows to get the low pressure quite the way you do the OxyContin. So those don't really capture addiction, but the remaining 9 do, and you'll notice that they cluster into problems in that value calculator, dopamine calculator, right? And that can lead to the symptom that is so hard for families to understand, which is this phenomenon of persistent use despite negative consequences. That's what every family, if I do a family program, I'm just looking at the clock to see how deep I can get into the lecture before the first hand goes up. And that family member will ask the same question: why don't they stop? Why would they do this? Why would they do these things even though they hurt us, even though they could lose everything? Maybe if they value alcohol more than they value their children, maybe they have no values. That's not it. It's that something has gone terribly, terribly wrong in the brain's main way of calculating value, right? The second one would be dopamine and glutamate working together, memory and learning, which can go a long way to explaining relapse, especially what triggers relapse and loss of control. But then the third one, and this is the symptom that matters to everybody who isn't the person with addiction. This is the symptom that matters to the most to the person who actually has addiction. This phenomenon of craving, which is very, very difficult to capture into words. This emotional, intense, ruminative, involuntary thought process about the drug that will not quit, right? And that to me is the most important feature of addiction, the sine qua non of the diagnosis of addiction, right? But the dopamine hypothesis helps us here because something goes wrong here, and that upsets the brain's ability to recognize things that are good for survival, correctly rank them, remember them, and then predict them, right? So this is really where the neuroscience of addiction began. And this is the study that really began all of the research in neuroscience. You've heard of this study, it's a famous study, the Olds and Milner study, done in the 1950s, these 2 Canadian neurosurgeons, and this experiment probably could not have been done but for their genius at surgery because they weren't operating on human brains, right? And they were able to put probes that could deliver either electricity, that was first, but then it turned out drugs too do the same thing, into what they called the septal areas. We call this area the nucleus accumbens. And when they dropped that probe and they allowed that animal to press a lever to deliver electricity or drugs there, it completely took over the animal's behavior. He would do nothing else but press that lever. He wouldn't drink, he wouldn't eat, even though he was starving and dying of hunger. He wouldn't move off an electrified grate, he'd just sit there and fry and press that lever. And so what the Olds and Milner study showed is that laboratory animals will reliably self-administer drugs of abuse, the very same drugs of abuse that humans self-administer, but only to certain areas of the brain. They will do so avidly and even to the point of death. So anytime you hear people saying drugs hijack the brain, this is the study they're talking about. It's a metaphor, it's an imperfect metaphor, right? But kinda, right? So this is the next study that I think is important to know. The probe was replaced with a double-bored syringe, again, right there. And through the center bore, the animal could press a lever to deliver drug. And it didn't seem to matter what drug you used, stimulants, opioids, nicotine. They all seem to do the same thing. And then if you, a little pump sucked up whatever fluid was there through the outer bore, you could analyze that fluid. We know something's changing there. What is it? And when they analyzed that distillate, they found that whatever the drug they put there, there was this increase in the concentration of dopamine. And if you understand this next slide, you will understand so much about what drives the behavior of people with addiction. It wasn't just the amount of dopamine, it was how fast the dopamine was released, right? So the change in concentration of this neurotransmitter dopamine, right, in time in this area of the brain is the brain's value calculator. That is how it knows it has come across something that is good for survival. It was not meant for these spikes of dopamine. Those spikes of dopamine are toxic, and at the top of the list, the biggest, fastest dopamine releasers would be smoked cocaine or smoked methamphetamine. And that's not to insult heroin. Alcohol is a fine drug. It's just by virtue of their pharmacology and their route of administration, the psychostimulants blow the others out of the water. So every heroin epidemic in the United States has been followed by a psychostimulant epidemic. It is sort of the natural progression, right? But that spike of dopamine is extremely dangerous. And you have to imagine the person smoking crystal meth over and over again, getting that spike of dopamine. The value of the drug is being recalculated and recalculated on the level of survival, and the drug just climbs so high in its value on that survival list that eventually it is survival. It's indistinguishable. And this is where you get that voice, which only the person with addiction, I think, will truly recognize, not understand. Nobody understands it, which is the best way to get the kids back and straighten everything out with the probation officer and avoid that next bout of pancreatitis is to secure survival now, and then we'll worry about that other stuff next. That's crazy, but that is addiction taking place. So you will lose the ability of punishment to reliably influence behavior in time. Most of the time it works. When I woke up this morning, I would say 90% of what was keeping me sober was the punishment. I don't want to go back to prison. What makes me interesting and different from the normie is that you can't rely on that. And I'm going to need something to cover myself for that remaining 10, 20, 30%. To me, in the culture that I got sober in, that is the daily maintenance of a spiritual condition. If I do that, then I'm kind of covered for the whole 100%. But this is why, and I've tried to explain this to prosecutors over and over again, you will only get so far. So I would say, don't necessarily, I mean, there are other people that you have to serve besides this person with addiction, but recognize that punishment will not be the thing that deters the person when things really get bad. So if we drill down and look at this dopamine map, right, and that green arrow I showed you earlier, that's this green arrow. We're talking about the change in concentration of dopamine in time here. The reason that stimulants can release so much so quickly is that they have no middleman. They work directly at this synapse. Other drugs come through a back door. So just one of the things that alcohol does is it acts on the opioid system, and it blocks that and normalizes dopamine release downstream. So when we use a drug like an opioid blocker like naltrexone, we're taking essentially the opioid system out of the game, and that normalizes dopamine. So if this person drinks, they don't get as drunk, this is the hope, and they stop sooner and return to abstinence, right? That's the hope. It only works that well in some people. We used to think that where ketamine works is purely at this glutamate receptor called the NMDA receptor, and blocking that receptor creates this dissociant effect, which is useful for the brain in coping with trauma, also useful in pediatric anesthesia, but now we understand that ketamine works on the opioid system too. That may be the reason for its ability to rapidly reverse treatment-resistant depression, at least for a little while, right? So we're starting to kind of figure this out. We're starting to see how normal behaviors can be practiced and manipulated and delivered in ways that they become intoxicants. And so it's a mess, right? But we're starting to get this little bag of tricks where we can kind of interrupt these processes and hopefully help people, stay sober when they're having a difficult time. I'm going to leave time for questions at the end. I know I'm kind of going real quick. And this is probably these next 3 slides are the most successful slides I've ever had with patients, right? The reason that spike of dopamine is toxic is that it's toxic to dopamine receptors. And essentially, that is the defect in addiction. People with addiction have too few of these dopamine D2 receptors, right? So here are 4 normal brains. Do not have addiction. Do not have adult ADHD, which means they didn't have childhood ADHD. They do not have the anhedonia of major depressive disorder, the inability to derive normal pleasure from normally pleasurable things. These people have not been victims of trauma, right? They have plenty of those dopamine receptors. Nice, big, healthy population of dopamine receptors. If you give them an intoxicant, that intoxicant lands on a normal system. And so it's a big feeling, but it doesn't rearrange their life. But this person is dopamine deaf. It's not a problem in the song, it's a problem in the ear. It's not a volume issue, it's a gain issue, right? And so when that drug comes along, it lands on very, very fertile soil, right? And so the question that I get from our patients is, do these receptors come back? Yes, they do. That's the good news. The bad news is, I gotta take out the intoxicant. And that's why we're not a controlled drinking school at our treatment program, right? This is always going to be the problem with certain harm reduction approaches, which will work in the short term, but as long as there's still use going on, it's always going to get away from you eventually, right? But if we can repair those receptors, and especially in young people, all of you, they repair quite quickly. They repair so quickly, it's actually a clinical problem, right? And we see this at our young adult program. People will come to group 2 weeks into treatment and say, you guys are great, AA is great, this whole recovery thing is great, I have to leave. I have to go right now. I'd love to stay, I can't. The job, the family, this is not about using drugs. It absolutely is about using drugs. So if I could get a ride to the airport, that'd be terrific, right? It's not that this person isn't healing, they're healing too quickly, right? And with that comes this overconfidence. This is the last study that I wanted to show you. It came out during the pandemic, and it showed that dopamine is not just released with rewarding things, it's also released with extremely aversive things. So we no longer believe that dopamine has valence. It's not good, it's not bad. So what I'm saying is, right, trauma releases dopamine, grief releases dopamine. At this early level of brain processing, before the signal gets to the amygdala, where it gets that first coating of basic emotion before it's handed up. And that basic emotion is almost always fear. But before that, the brain cannot tell the difference between intoxication and trauma. They are the same signal. And this is why you can see this very, very odd symptomatic overlap between trauma and addiction. Why does the soldier want to go back to the battlefield? I understand why a person would want to use alcohol or heroin again. But why does this person seem to have a pattern of repeating these extremely aversive traumatic experiences? Why does a person who's been in an abusive relationship seem to get into a series of, I want to be careful with my words here, because I do not want to imply that this person is the cause of their problem, but there's a pull that dopamine provides. And I think the brain is trying to figure this out. What is this? And so there is a weird reinforcing aspect even to something that is extremely aversive. So this would be a more modern understanding of what dopamine actually does. This is the part that we didn't know in 1997, but now we understand that dopamine is released with pleasurable things, with extremely motivating things, with new things. So psychedelics are not big dopamine releasers. People will say that. They don't release any dopamine. The first time they're used, they are, right? So when that person said, that time was the most amazing experience of my life, changed everything, right? That's dripping with dopamine. Subsequent uses, maybe not so much, far more in the serotonin system, I get it, right? But things that are extremely aversive, right? Things that almost happened. This is why gambling addicts chase losses, because to almost win, right, releases a lot of dopamine. Things that are nearby, proximal in space and time. This is the person who has scored the 8 ball. They are driving home. There isn't a single molecule of methamphetamine or cocaine in their bloodstream. They're already high. The brain is priming the pump. It knows that this person has had the drug in their hands and still screwed it up, right? So it needs to make sure that this actually, you don't get any points unless you actually use the drug. And I got this from Dr. Anna Lemke, who is the dual diagnosis chief at Stanford University. I highly recommend her book, Dopamine Nation. You've probably heard of it. Got a whole folder of her work. If you email me, I'll send it to you. She's got some great podcasts, right? One of them being the Huberman interview. She gave me this one. Things that are numerated and ranked also have some dopamine component to it, which is why we believe social media belongs on this list. So this is the power of the dopamine hypothesis. It shows us how all of these things come together: uppers, downers, strong, weak, legal, illegal, right? And if I have a problem with one, then I have a high likelihood of developing a problem with any of the others. So if the person is using heroin, which is really fentanyl, right? If the person is using opioids and they move over to cannabis, not a bad move, at least from a public health harm reduction standpoint. But the proprietary products of cannabis that are available are ultra potent. And so, yeah, you're changing from a drug that has lethality to a drug class that presumably has none, but there's still all that dopamine. And it's not that the brain isn't appreciative. It is. It says, hey, thank you for the pot. I appreciate the pot. You're doing a great job with the pot. But you're not quite where we were when we were shooting smack every day, so thank you for the pot. Get me what I want. And the person will be led back to the original, right? But this is the real power of the dopamine hypothesis, and this is why we have more than one program that can treat men with sexual compulsivity, that can treat women with love and relationship addiction. I know, right? Eating disorders, right? We have these specialty programs because it turns out that behaviors too can fit this rubric. So I look at every chart of every patient who comes to our system, right? Not to read, it's not my business, I'm not a voyeur, I try not to be. I'm trying to figure out what is this person's particular combination. Do they have a primary, maybe a secondary, maybe a behavioral pair over here? Because 99% of cocaine and methamphetamine use in men happens in women too, but especially men, especially gay men, it's not one thing. And so if you do not co-treat that with that, then they're going to start bouncing off of each other, right? And that was Patrick Carnes's insight. He wrote the book Out of the Shadows. He designed our program, General Path, right? So my goofy way of sort of keeping this in mind is this periodic table. I need to be reminded that, okay, maybe I had a Demerol problem, maybe I eventually had a cocaine problem, always had a kind of problem with alcohol, still struggling my behavior around sugar. This is what life is like with too few dopamine receptors. We usually continue to struggle with these things. So in the last few minutes before we go to questions, I want to show you this dopamine hypothesis as I've written it onto the thing. And again, highly recommend this book because this is a written form of this, right? And I've essentially tried to put the whole thing on one sheet of paper, right? So up here you'll find the ends of dopamine, and then down here are the assumptions that we can make if the dopamine hypothesis is true, and we may have to revise some of these as we go. I'll just show you a couple of them and then we'll go to questions, right? The rewarding properties and addictive potential of any intoxicant are directly related to the kinetics of its dopamine release. Now that you know that, it's almost impossible not to know it. And so I've kind of installed a little problem-solving engine into your head. And now you can go out into the world, and if you hear something ridiculous, like if you read a New York Times article that says that heroin addicts can go back to moderately using heroin, you will know why it's wrong, right? Or why this person, who's obviously trying to help you, that's good, right, just simply does not understand addiction, right? Psychedelics, very, very promising, all right? They will get out of that clinical container. MDMA, I'm not really all that worried about psilocybin. I'm deathly afraid of MDMA being diverted from well-meaning therapists out onto the street. I can think of 12 patients right now who came to our program and they had severe addiction. A couple of them died, and their entire addiction played out in one drug, and that was methylene dioxymethamphetamine, all right? So when folks say this is going to change everything, this is going to solve world peace, right? They don't understand addiction. But you do, either intuitively as a person in recovery, or because you understand these basic facts. So one of the things that really matters is things like, how is it delivered? The fastest way to get any drug into your brain is to smoke it, right? Only one trip through the heart, and that's why inhalation is a particularly dangerous form of drug intake, right? So why have vapes not been the nicotine cessation device that we were hoping that they would be? I mean, there's equivocal evidence. Some say yes, some say no, because of the delivery, because of the amount of nicotine that is far in excess of what a regular cigarette can deliver, right? Now you understand that. Why is fentanyl so much more deadly dangerous even than heroin? Well, this is the group we're talking about here, the opioids, right? The classic narcotic pain relievers. As you move from left to right in my chart, the drugs either become more potent, they bind to the receptor that they bind to tighter, or they just feel better. They're better liked and therefore more likely to create addiction. At the low end here, you will find buprenorphine, which is a weird opioid. Molecularly, it's different from all of the others, right? And that weirdness, that difference, can actually make it a very good treatment for the very thing we're trying to treat, which is opioid use disorder. To the extent that it is possible to know anything in medicine, we know that buprenorphine decreases mortality. So if we have a patient come to our program and in the course of their treatment they're diagnosed with opioid use disorder and they leave not on buprenorphine, I need to know why. Very often there's a very good reason. People have their, or they just say, I just don't want to do that. Fine. But we need to make sure that we've done everything we can to introduce and connect this person to the one thing that we know will make sure that they can fog a mirror in 1 year's time. As you come up here, we come to things like kratom, get a lot more kratom, especially this new hydroxykratom, right? Come up here to the old, pain reliever, standby. Morphine is the prototype opioid. It's the one we measure all the others by, right? And then, of course, we come to these extremely hyperpotent opioids, the fentanyl, right? So when we talk about opiates, we're talking about those drugs that came directly from the opium poppy. That's morphine and codeine. All codeine is pre-morphine, so when a dentist gives you codeine, Tylenol with codeine, they're really giving you morphine, right? And then if you boil morphine in vinegar, you get diacetyl morphine, which is called heroin, right? So opioids are any drug that has some activity at an opioid receptor. So naltrexone would be an opioid even though it's an antagonist, right? So these are the ones you typically encounter, and morphine, is just one of the most useful drugs that we've ever come across. But it is not a very fat-soluble molecule, right? If you use morphine, shoot it, smoke it, whatever, you'll get high. But it's going to take a good 15, 20 minutes for that really to build up. You boil it in vinegar, it becomes a much, much more lipophilic molecule. That rockets into the brain. Now, that is too bulky a molecule to actually fit into the mu-opioid receptor. So if you want to be technical, there's no such thing as a heroin high. Heroin can't bind. What does the brain do? It breaks off these vinegar groups. Now it's morphine again. That can bind. So heroin has something that morphine doesn't. Heroin has something that makes it so much more addictive, even than basically the same molecule, morphine, has a rush. It comes on quickly, right? That's what provides the danger. When we come, and so usually when a person uses heroin, right, the levels climb very quickly, and then as that heroin is converted to the intermediate product, 6-MAM, and then to the next product, morphine, you'll see the heroin levels drop, 6-MAM levels drop, and morphine comes on, and it lasts for about 3 to 4, sometimes more hours. And that's why there's always been a pattern of use with opioids, even people who are really, really experienced, of maybe 2-3 times a day. Then came this stuff, all right? Invented by the second most famous Belgian ever, Paul Janssen. Many of the drugs that we use, he just had a mind for putting molecules into receptors, right? But it is the actual structural property of fentanyl that makes it so deadly dangerous. This is an extremely lipophilic drug. So the minute you get it on board, it has a very, very high volume of distribution, which is the minute you get it on a mucosal surface, it's everywhere in the body almost instantaneously. And so what happens is the person will use this drug, right? And immediately it will go right into the brain. And so what the person recognizes is a very intense, very fast euphoria. Then the brain immediately starts pumping it out. So the brain gets the euphoria, and then the euphoria falls off, and the brain will want it back. So it's not that the drug is gone, it's just not in the brain anymore. It's entering other tissue compartments, right? So that person will have to redose, right? And then redose again, okay? And what's happening is the fentanyl is building up in other tissue compartments, right? But before long, this person has really, had this pattern. So this is a crack cocaine pattern. We've never seen this with opioids before, but it is possible to die from a fentanyl overdose from a dose you took yesterday. And that is merely a consequence of the molecular properties of fentanyl, right? All right, I think this is a good place to kind of, wrap up. Does anyone have any questions? Anything? Yes, ma'am.
For addiction medicine, where are they at with treatment for medications for treatment of psychostimulant addiction?
Better. So first of all, this supplement, N-acetylcysteine, right, which you can just buy in the store, there's some evidence, not great, that it helps people with cocaine addiction, right? So we put almost everybody who's coming in with cocaine use disorder, or at least offer them N-acetylcysteine. So there's that, right? George Koob, who is the current director of the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, he did an experiment where he gave naltrexone, opioid blocker, with buprenorphine, partial mu opioid blocker, kappa opioid antagonist. And so it doesn't make sense, right? Why would you give a naltrexone? Because you're going to take away the opioid receptor, or the mu opioid receptor. Yes, but it preserves the antagonism at the dysphoria receptor, the kappa receptor. And that combination, naltrexone and buprenorphine, has been shown to be helpful in aborting methamphetamine relapse. So we're starting to get these things, and I think that we will have the same kind of bag of tricks that we have for alcohol use disorder, opioid use disorder, with these others. The debate is, are these psychedelics like a brand new entry into the treatment of addiction? We'll have to see how that fleshes out. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely.
Great. All right. Any other questions? Looks like I'm going to have to wrap things up here. Nothing? Okay. Well, I tell you what, it was wonderful to see you. Thank you so much. Maybe the next time we meet, we'll talk about these behaviors, like, for instance, this thing, all right? The drug that scares me the most, quite frankly, truly keeps me up at night, is sportsbook betting on smartphones and college-age males, right? That has the potential to wipe out trillions of dollars of wealth, right? And so when you look at a slot machine, understand this is a very, very carefully constructed dopamine releaser. It is designed to spike as much dopamine as quickly as it can. So it's not just that you put your coin in and you pull the thing and the reels go. If you have the ability to stop those reels, that creates a lot more dopamine, right? It's not just betting on the game and who's going to win, it's betting on the next play. It's betting on the next 5 pitches, right? That within-game betting is much, much more dangerous, right? And I assure you, the sales portal on Amazon plays by these same rules. Those rules are built into that sales portal, right? So now you know these things. I think you can go out there and understand these things, I hope, right? Please feel free to contact me and ask questions, but now you should understand why this is a terrible idea. Right? Terrible idea. Don't do that. Because there's going to be some people for whom it's just a convenience, but for other people, it actually begins the end of their life. All right, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Dr. McCauley. What an excellent talk. We are going to bring to you our next speaker now, Professor Terry Rogers. Professor Rogers is a dedicated educator with 17 years of experience here at CASPER College. He is a recipient of the Rosenthal Award for Teaching Excellence, and Terry has spent his career not only empowering students in the classroom, but also serving some of the most vulnerable populations in our community. In this year's presentation, Calling Out the Biggest Liar You Know, Realize, Reframe, Rewrite, and Rise, Terry is going to challenge us to confront the biggest liar in our lives, the one inside our own head. We'll look at the half-truths and false stories we tell ourselves and learn how to reframe them into building blocks for growth, confidence, and resilience. It's about turning struggle into strength by changing the narrative. Please welcome Professor Terry Rogers.
So before I dive in, I just thank Doug for those kind words. I so appreciate you. Thank you for that. Before I dive in, I just want to say this because time is going to be of the essence for us. Down the road here, I'm going to need your help to do this presentation. And I'm going to need about 10 volunteers to come on stage with me. Okay? So this gives you the opportune time to go ahead and go through all the panicking processing that you need to do to be able to volunteer in a little bit, right? So when I say, hey, I need volunteers, we can just shortcut right to you coming up rather than setting and me cajoling and trying to get you to come up, okay? So I'm going to need 10 volunteers, the first 10 people to come up here and when I ask for it. Be brave. I promise that it will be rewarding. I promise that it will be life-changing, and I promise that it will be transformational. And if you want that, volunteer, okay? Okay, so let me start now. You might have seen this out in the lobby, the pamphlet for the presentation. And do you have the slide that's the one with all the names on it? Is that a possibility? Yeah, that one. Okay, so here we are at the Empower Conference, right? Learning about all things powerful. And I just want to share some observations with you. Damon West, MS in Criminal Justice. Dr. Kevin McCauley, Senior Fellow at Meadows Behavioral Health. Christy Hahn, RN, MS, CAP, LPC. John Ordway, MS, LPC, LAT, and Terry Rogers. Probably the least powerful person at the Empower Conference today, no initial guy, Terry Rogers. If you open the pamphlet, Damon West, in criminal justice, is a college professor, internationally known keynote speaker, 3-time Wall Street Journal best-selling author. Dr. Kevin McCauley is a senior fellow at Meadows Behavioral Health. Christy Hahn is currently the clinical director at Wyoming Recovery, a residential substance abuse treatment facility where she supports individuals on their path to recovery. John Ordway is the clinical director for the Wyoming Professional Assistance Program. And Terry Rogers has a wish. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And to be really honest with you, when I read the pamphlet, here's my wish. I wish I were still at home in bed with the blankets pulled up over my head because this scares me spitless. Because why? Because I don't feel like when I'm in this room in front of you, I have any power, nor do I have any control, and I hate that. Anybody feel me? Been in a situation where you're out of control, where you have no power, where you feel like it's all just getting away from you? And here's the question that I ask. I know who I am. I know my journey. I know my experiences. I know what I bring to this stage. And in that much time, I can spin up a story that says I have nothing to offer you. Why? You should get on this phone number and you should call Bree and say, hey, Bree, why did you invite that guy? He got no initials. Why'd you call him in? I mean, I get that the cost of admission today is free, and when you look at my name and my description, you're probably thinking you overpaid. I get it. But here's the deal. I talk about in my classes, we subscribe to this mythology. A myth is a story or a legend that is passed down by people that we see in authority to explain things that we might otherwise see as unexplainable. And we come to believe those myths as truths because we believe in the storyteller more than we believe even in the story. And so we don't test the veracity, the truth of the story because we trust the storyteller. And so then I ask the question, who is the most trustworthy, honest storyteller that you know? Myself. Man, I'm going to tell you this. The storyteller in me says this. If I wanted to, I could put initials behind my name. They would be AA, alcoholic addict. And here's the story I spin up as I stand in front of you at the Empower Conference following Dr. McCauley. I'm an addict, but I'm worse than all of the other addicts? Or I'm not as bad and I don't have as good a story, so why do they want to listen to me? Tell me what to do with that. And so I have long been an advocate of the fact that I'll do whatever you ask me to do. If you show me where the switch is, I will flip it. Stop being a rage monster. Okay, show me where to flip the switch. I have depression. Well, stop being sad. All right, show me where the switch is. Step into your power. Okay, I'll do that. Show me where the switch is. And so today, what I want to do is walk you through maybe a tool, an observation, something that I hope gives you access to the switch that would help you access and find your power in situations where you find yourself subscribing to the false narratives up here. How can we break those storylines? Anybody want to go on that walk with me? Yeah. Okay, I need 10 people. Come on up. 10 people who are at the Empower Conference feeling like power is a problem. Power is a struggle. Control is a problem. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Got them all. Thank you. Come on. So I'm going to bring you, since you're right there, let's just have you come right over here and stand with me. Yes. So sorry. Good job, though. I appreciate it. Come here and shake my hand. Hi. How are you? I'm good. How are you? Are you feeling like way out of power and control right now? A little bit. Okay. Tell me your name. Jen. Jen. Yeah. You okay? Yeah. You'll be all right? Yeah. Okay. You stand right here. Okay. All right. So, theoretically, like I'm taking a scientific guess at this, but we're at this place called the Empower Conference, and we're talking about power. And so I would argue that the it that we're looking for today is power. Right? Okay, so what is that? How do you know when you got it? You feel it. Okay, but what is the it that you feel? Like, I get that, right? What is the it? Right? So if we're going to do this, I think we should all start out on the same page. So let me share with you a definition of power. Please don't move, Jen. Here's the definition of power that I'd like us to operate with today. The strength to live courageously, facing our fears, and making a difference in the world. Okay? The strength to live courageously, and face our fears. Okay? Okay, so Jen, we're at the Power Conference. Yeah, right. We're at the conference and we're feeling not so powerful. Okay, so I want you to just forget about these people because I just want you and I to have a conversation. Okay? So I want you to think about someplace in your life where you feel like there is like a loss of power, where there's no control. Okay, wherever that is, right? Okay. As an example, I have eating issues. I wish I had power over that. That would be my thing, right? And I don't want to like plant anything. Okay, so self-control. Okay. All right. So if this room, particularly the stage area, would represent all of your universe, your personal space and universe, right? This power that you want, the self-control that you want, is in here somewhere out of your reach. It's elusive. Like, where would you place that in terms of just creating a little scene? Like, where does power, the self-control that you want, live? Up there, okay? Okay? So, because I don't have a ladder, can we just put that over here? Can we get the power that you're seeking over here? Okay. Could you pick one of these people to play power? Self-control. Just pick a person who looks like self-control for you.
I would say you, because you look very lovely.
Okay, so look here. Awesome. Look at that, okay?
Professionalism.
Yeah, right, so we're going to have you stand right here. We're going to have you come back over here, Jen. Okay. If we want power, it seems like all we got to do is go and get it, right?
There's a hole.
Yeah, there's a hole there. Go get the power, right? If we want it, we go get it. Isn't that what all the self-help books say? If you want it, go get it. Right? This is Dr. McCauley's speech. If you want to get clean, go get it. If you want to break your addiction, go get it. And we would go get the power that we want, except, let's be honest, there are obstacles in the way. Jen, the self-control that you want, what's an obstacle that's in the way of you having that? What's shutting you off or keeping you from having self-control?
Probably like
It's okay.
emotional intellect.
Okay, okay, hang on. Can you pick a person to represent the challenge of emotional? So I'm going to say low emotional intellect. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm building
Yeah.
it up.
Okay, so show me here who is low emotional intellect. No, it's okay. It's just a representation. It's okay. It could be a poster board. It's okay.
Michelle, just so that way I don't feel bad. Because
Okay.
I know you.
Now, stop right there. In terms of where this low emotional intellect problem is, this challenge between you and the self-control that you want, where does it exist that keeps you blocked off from getting it? Is it like right here? Or is it
Right in the forte.
right here in the middle?
Yeah.
Closer to you or farther away from you?
Maybe a little bit further.
Okay, further away from you?
There's probably one more.
Okay. Okay, good, okay. Okay, so this is low emotional intellect, okay? What's another obstacle or challenge that's keeping you from getting
Trauma.
trauma? Okay, can you pick a person to play trauma?
I don't want to pick on you guys.
You're not picking on them. It's not about them. Trust me, it's not about them.
Gentlemen, just because of the beard.
Where do you want trauma to be relative to challenge?
He would be right here.
Okay, okay, okay. Okay, now, here's the deal. Trauma, low emotional self-intellect. So let's call it low self-awareness. Can I do that?
That
Just
would
a
work,
short
yes,
okay.
yes. I
So
think
low
that would-
self-awareness. Those present as challenges blocking us off from self-control where we would find power. Correct? Yes? Okay? But here's the lie. Here's part of the lie. These challenges really, they don't matter. Because here's the real story. This challenge, this obstacle of self-awareness has a message that it speaks to you. What does it say? What is this message
Oh, like my internal thoughts?
about When you hear the story of low self-awareness or low self-intellect or low emotional intellect, what is the message that you hear?
Oh, that I act like a kid.
Oh,
I'm an adult,
so can I
but I'm
change
a
it?
kid at heart.
You're childish.
I am a
You're
childish.
childish,
Yes.
right? That's pretty negative, right?
Yes.
All agree? Okay?
You guys-
Now, who's the message that's you're childish? So, now, when you hear the message, you're childish, is it an in-your-face message? Is it over here nitpicking at you? Is it from behind you? It's right. Okay, it's right here. Okay, so childish, okay? Now, is it, okay, we've placed it. Let's talk about its tone. Is it accusing? Is it angry? How does that message come off to you? How does it sound? Okay, so can you just say, can you be, let's try very, I'll just use the word, let's be mean for now. And let's say, you're childish. Let's say you're childish, and let's be really accusatory. That's the word, accusatory. Say you're childish.
You're childish.
Ooh, yeah? Okay, you're childish.
You're childish. You're childish. You're childish.
I feel accurate?
Yeah.
Okay, hang on to that for a second. Now, this trauma has a message. It speaks about you, okay? This trauma says something to you. What is it that trauma says to you? What is that? You're not good enough. Pick somebody for that message.
It would have to be a deep voice. I'm gonna go with. Sorry, I don't want to.
Okay? You're not good enough. Where does that voice, does it smack you in the face? Does it accuse you and chase after you? Does it anchor you
Back
down?
of my head,
Okay,
always
so-
going into the front.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it feel like it has pressure on you?
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't you put your hands on her? Is it okay if he touches you?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
For
You're
a-
not good enough. Just
You are not
push down,
good enough.
push down. More accusatory.
You are not good enough.
You're childish.
You are not good
You're
enough.
childish.
You are not good
You're
enough.
childish.
Does that feel accurate?
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah, okay, good. Okay, I want you to pick a person to play you now. Okay, can I have you step here? Can I have you step right here? Okay, can you step right here? No, you step right
Oh,
here.
me. Oh,
And you
sorry.
step in here.
Oh, God, no.
Okay.
Oh, God.
Now, can you two sit down? And I want to bring you over here. Be strong. Be strong. Be strong. I want you right here, okay? Okay. This is you. Okay, I just want to look at this, and I just want to see if this seems like it's what you process. Okay? So can we just run that scene with the lines just like we had just done them? Okay, all you have to do is stand there. Sorry. But this doesn't have to stick to you. This is her story. Okay, this is her movie. Okay? Okay, so let's go. Oppressive, accusatory. Let's go.
You are not
You're
good enough.
childish.
You are not
You're
good enough.
childish.
You are
You're
not good enough.
childish.
Keep going.
You
You're
are
childish.
not good enough.
You're childish.
You are not good enough.
You're
Okay.
childish.
Does it feel like any changes that you would make? In what keeps you from accessing the power that you want? Does this feel like what it is for you?
Yeah, but I think like my adventures here at CASPER College, like it's changed, like it's gotten better because I've had support.
Right. We're just talking about what right now
Oh,
is
yeah.
blocking you off.
Yeah.
Right? And what's keeping you from the self-control that you said would make you feel more powerful. Okay, so this feels like, can we run it one more time?
You are not good
You're
enough.
childish.
You are not good enough.
You're childish.
You are not good enough.
You're childish.
Does that feel right? Okay, now let me ask you a question. What would you tell that person about what's happening in their world right now to make it go away?
You're good enough and
Pick somebody to play that voice. Yeah.
that you are good enough,
Okay, can you,
that you're worthy.
you're good enough and you're worthy. These are your lines. Okay, you're good enough. And where would you want
She
Jen?
would be on my other ear.
On the other ear?
Yeah.
And how would that sound?
Praising.
Praising,
Motherly, I guess.
motherly, okay? Uplifting, maybe, okay?
Supportive.
Okay, so can we just hear that just for a second? Would there be any touch associated?
It would probably be a hug.
And now, can we hear it? Now can we hear it? Is there anything else that we would add, that we would tell Jen? Anything else that we would give Jen in this situation? Anything else that you want her to know? Anything else that you want Jen to know about Jen?
Be patient, like patience with myself, like
Okay.
I'm more understanding,
Be patient and more understanding.
because
with
I'm
yourself.
learning about like.
How about give yourself a break?
Yeah,
Like that. Does that sound good?
yeah.
Can we do this for
like
something like
that's-
that?
Yeah.
And where would that message come at you from?
Right on the other side, like right here to where it's like.
Here-ish?
Yeah.
Okay, give yourself a break.
He's breaking the monopoly, it's like redoing the negative thing.
Give yourself a break is the message though.
Yeah.
Okay, can we hear what that sounds like?
Give yourself
Anything we
It's like, it's like not, I don't know, like, it's like chill out, you're okay, like, you don't have to put on a show, like, you don't have to be
Don't have to
something
put on a
like that,
show.
like, I don't know.
Give yourself a break. You don't have to put on a show. And how does it sound?
Calming and warm, I guess,
Calming
it's
and warm.
like, hey,
Is
just
it-
be you.
Is there any other kind of
Yeah, it's like on your shoulder and just be like, you know, it's okay type deal.
Okay,
It's
so can we
like
do that?
other one.
not that you don't have to give yourself a break. You don't have to be.
Yeah.
You don't have to be big enough.
Just summarize
Okay,
it.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. So let's hear the two positive voices together. Let's do that. Okay? Does that seem right? Can I adjust this just a little bit?
Yeah.
Can I adjust this just a
Of
little bit?
course.
I want you're hugging here. I want you to sit and cut this one out. And I want you, can you touch his? Okay. Arm up here, hand up here, in, protect. There we go. Now let's hear those voices. Okay, now let's watch this happen. Okay, put all of the stuff into play. Okay, go.
You are not.
You are childish.
You are not.
You
good
are
enough.
childish.
Are you listening to me?
You
You're not
are
good enough.
childish.
You're not good enough.
You are childish.
Listen, you're not good
You
enough.
are childish.
Okay. Okay. So let's just time out. Okay, Jen, we're just going to take a little time out. Okay, time out. And here's what I want you to understand and I want you to see. There are two choices at play. Right? There are two sets of voices, and you, competent, intelligent, critical thinking human beings, you have a choice. You can take captive every thought. You can choose which thought to entertain. You can choose which thought to listen to. And if you want to be powerful, then choose the thoughts that are power-giving. Choose the thoughts that are life-giving. Watch again. Can we run that, please?
You are not good
You
enough.
are childish.
You're not good enough.
You are
You're not
childish.
good enough.
You are childish.
Okay, perfect. That's where we were going next. Okay, so if we were going to, we don't want to hurt them because they're volunteers like you, right? But what would you do? You would remove them from the scene? Is that what you said? Go sit down. Go sit down. We don't need you Remember how we started? You had obstacles that were stopping you from accessing the self-control and the power that you want in your life. And because of those challenges, you were wearing labels and stories and narratives about yourself that were keeping you from making the walk. Right?
Yeah.
But you made some observations and some changes. Right? You made a choice to listen to these two, to trust these two voices. So can we run that with Jen here? Okay. Now, can you frame what's happening for you? I am, I can stand.
I can be that professional that everybody goes to.
I can access my power.
I can do that.
Can you? Okay, so let me hear you say it again.
I can access that professionalism that I strive for.
In this statement, do you believe that this trauma can be sidestepped and got way down? Do you believe in this I can statement, that this low self-awareness into emotional awareness, it can be gotten rid of?
Oh, yeah.
And you've cleared a path? Now, tell me the statement again. I can what?
I can be the best professional. Like, I can be a professional.
Can I hold your hand? Come with me. Yes. Let's do it here.
I can be a professional.
Oh, amazing. I want you to go back to the middle. Tell them one more time.
I can be a professional.
One more person I want you to tell. Okay? Okay.
I can be a professional.
Yeah, you
Really?
can.
Wait. Does that person believe you?
Yes.
Yes? Or you said a little bit. Make this person believe it.
I can be a professional.
No, come on.
I can be a professional.
One more time.
I can be a professional.
There you go. Does that feel like accessing power and self-control?
Yeah, I'm nervous.
Go over there and grab hold.
This is why they wanted you here. It doesn't matter about anything else.
You're amazing. Thank you.
Make no mistake. Make no mistake that wherever you are, whatever walk of life you're in, you have stories that you're carrying that are holding you back. And here's like the thing that just eats my bacon. They're lies.
Yeah.
Those chains and those anchors are lies. They are false narratives. They are myths created in the bowels of our brain, in our bowels and gets to our brain. Let's just say it that way. Right? They are those kinds of stories. And they do nothing but limit you and keep you from accessing the what it is, the it that you want. And I just have this deep-seated belief that it is that you all are here in this conference and here on this college campus because at some level you want to impact the world.
Yeah.
And that means, I don't know what that means. Like we heard Charlie Kirk's name. He had a huge impact on the world. Man, if I could just keep my family, that would be good.
Yeah.
I'll take that. I'll put that in the win column. and watch the ripples happen from that. But here's the thing. I guess here's the challenge. You have to do the work. You have to be willing to look at the stories. And you have to be willing to test them. And then do the work that we just did. We didn't do anything miraculous here today, but I bet it felt pretty good. Yeah, right?
Good and scary. So
Good and scary. But does it feel like this, Jen? Does it feel like the strength to live courageously, to face your fears, and make a difference in the world? Man, I will take that feeling. I will take that feeling all day, every day. And wouldn't you? And all we did was take captive the thought, reframe it, and rewrite it. And I will say this to you, I will go to my deathbed saying this. And some of you in this room have heard me say it before. What you believe affects how you think. How you think affects how you feel, and how you feel affects how you behave. And if you want a different behavior, change the lie that is your belief system. And that's where power comes from. I don't want to get in the way of the neuroscience lecture. Do not want to get in the way of that at all. But if you believe that you can't make it through the day without putting a needle in your arm, guess what you're going to do before the day is over? Done. Change the belief. In my spiritual awakening and my recovery lifestyle, I believe that I have a higher power that can get me through a day far more superior than a needle in my arm ever will.
Amen.
And that's where I'm going to live. And that's where I'm going to access my power. That's where I challenge you to access your power as well. Thank you. It's my 10:30 and
up here, you'll notice that QR code. If you are here from a class, you need to snap that QR code and find your class in there, and then it will show that you were here. So that's what that QR code is for, if you were wondering. I'll let the room settle a little. All right, our next session will be co-led by two outstanding educators and clinicians from right here at CASPER College. Christy Hahn is a registered nurse, licensed counselor, and the clinical director at Wyoming Recovery. She also serves as an instructor in our wonderful addiction studies program at CASPER College, where she is shaping the next generation of leaders in the field of recovery and treatment. Joining her is John Ordway, a licensed professional counselor and a highly respected faculty member and academic chair for the psychology department here at CASPER College. John has built his career helping individuals navigate life's most difficult challenges with a focus on resilience, mental health, and the connection between thought and behavior. His work bridges the classroom and the counseling room, giving him a unique ability to translate complex ideas into practical strategies for growing and healing. Together, they'll present From Wounds to Wisdom, Reprogramming Trauma for a Life Reimagined. Please help me welcome Professors Christy Hahn and John Ordway.
Oh no.
Okay.
All right. So as Doug said, I'm John Ordway. I've been licensed professional counselor, licensed addictions therapist for, well, too long because I'm old, over 20 years. Worked in the prison setting, free world setting, and now work with professionals through their licensing boards. Anything you want to add?
No, I've just been in the helping field myself, either as a nurse or a clinician, now as a teacher for probably close to 30 years as well. So I've been in this field for a minute.
It's her way of saying we're both old.
I didn't say
She's
that.
younger though, so we actually should have done Terry's after ours because we're going to talk a little bit about those voices and where do those voices come from. And we saw a great strategy of how we overcome those voices. So as we start to talk about this idea of trauma and how do we reprogram this, we all think of trauma as something exceptionally catastrophic, something horrible. And then we go on to Facebook, or I'm old, that's where I stopped, social media, I know there's other ones. And we look at people that have it worse than us. And we're like, oh, mine wasn't that bad, I'm overreacting, and we downplay it. Or we look at folks who it was like very much worse than us, or better than, not as bad as us, but they're blowing it out of proportion. Wow, they're really melodramatic, and I don't want to be dramatic. So we always find a way to be our own worst critic. And like Terry was talking about, what's the voice we're listening to? And we're going to talk about how those voices, the voices that we listen to most often, create the biggest challenges for us. So when we talk about trauma, we know that 60% of men are going to experience at least one traumatic event in their lifetime. 50% of women are going to face traumatic experiences in their lifetime. And I'm going to tell you right now, I am willing to bet a lot of money, but we won't talk about my gambling addiction, Dr. McCauley, that'll be fine, that those are significantly underreported, okay? Either because I don't believe it's a traumatic event, or it wasn't that big of a deal, or I didn't report the crime or the assault. But we know that from the ACEs study, and we'll talk a little bit more about that for those that aren't familiar with the ACEs, 30 to 40 million adults have an ACE score of 4 or greater. And we'll talk about what that means as well. Next. So it's more than words, right? You ever just walk into a place and it just feels wrong? You ever go test drive a new car and you're like, yeah, it's got all the things I want, but it doesn't feel right, right? And that's our limbic brain, our emotional brain, saying the vibes are just off. We can't, that part of the brain isn't capable of language. So we just have to kind of make something up, right? And it just feels wrong. And so how do we deal with that feeling? Because that feeling actually creates those voices that Terry so greatly played out up here. And it creates a living memory. Because we remember a time when we were scared. We remember a time when we were embarrassed, when we were ashamed. And then that follows us. Oh yeah, I don't want to try that new thing because one time I failed. Or I was told I wasn't good enough, or I believed I wasn't good enough, or smart enough, or pretty enough, or whatever enough. Next slide.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the brain and how that works and the role that it plays with trauma. And there's 2 parts of the brain we're going to talk about, and I will go over them more specifically here in a minute. But the first 2 parts of the brain I want to talk about is the prefrontal cortex. And that's the part of the brain where we spend most of our time in existence. That's where we have our executive functioning. That's where we have our morals and values. That's how we make decisions. And that's really the important part of our brain that we utilize the most. In trauma, however, our amygdala, so the second part of the brain that's important in trauma, the amygdala is our threat detection area of our brain. And when trauma, crisis, perceived crisis or perceived trauma occurs, that amygdala is actually activated. And that is the alarm system, the fight or flight part of our brain. And we don't really want to exist very long there. It's designed for survival. And so when something traumatic happens, it's like our prefrontal cortex goes offline and our amygdala, our survival portion of our brain, goes online. And that's okay initially because that gets us through that traumatic event, which we need. I'm going to change pictures just for a minute, and I'm going to give you an example. The first thing we're going to talk about is the hijacking, circuit hijacking. So the two parts of our brain. The watchtower is going to be our prefrontal cortex. So the watchtower, if you have a big forest and you have this watchtower, the watchtower actually is the rational voice that tells what's going on in the forest. Is there a potential fire? Is there smoke over here? Is there a fire over here? And the amygdala is like the alarm. And let's say there's a small brush fire over here, and this alarm goes off, the amygdala goes off, and it's so loud that it can no longer hear what the person in the watchtower is saying, which is the prefrontal cortex. And that watchtower might say, it's just a small brush fire, no panic, no worry, we don't need to evacuate. But the alarm is so loud, it can't hear that. And there comes the panic, and here comes the challenges. And if we live in that place for too long, we start to develop a neural hardwiring process. And with repeated trauma or repeated crisis, we develop kind of what we refer to as a pathway, a circuitry pathway. There's a famous saying, neurons that fire together, wire together. So if we're functioning from repeated trauma or inability to manage trauma, we are creating a pathway, and over time, that's the only pathway that we end up using, and that can be really dangerous. So neural processing, I want you to think of trauma, the amygdala, going down, it's shutting off roads and options all over. You have one path to go on, one path with the amygdala and with this neural hardwiring. And it's that traffic over there. We're stuck in trauma. We keep going down the same path. There's too much congestion. There's not enough movement. And with healing and neuroplasticity, the plasticity is part of our brain that allows us to heal. That allows us to create new pathways away from our trauma, away from the amygdala. And so that's very important for healing. Plasticity, our brains, believe it or not, are plastic. And as children, the plasticity was much higher. That's when we were learning so much, but we still have that as adults. And so creating new pathways is really key to trauma. We have to get that amygdala to understand when we need survival and when we don't, because we don't have to stay in that area. We need that frontal cortex to come back online. And to do that, therapy, EMDR, somatic services, mindfulness, self-awareness, other therapeutic approaches can help with that, which helps the frontal cortex come back online and really work with the rational thinking. So let's talk about the amygdala real quick. I gotta get my cards though. Okay, so once the amygdala is activated, that again is our threat detection center, right? It is available 24/7. It's always scanning for danger. It's always scanning. It's almost scanning without our awareness of that, but we're always looking for potential dangers, okay? And when there's a threat or a perceived threat, that alarm will go off, okay? And that response is very rapid and it's automatic. So think about that as you experience a traumatic event or several traumatic events, and there's a perceived threat, but it's really not as bad as maybe we understand or think it is. But we still have this reaction because of the pathways, those circuitry and that hijacking that happened. So we're going to have the same response regardless of the degree of the threat, whatever that is. So from that, we have this alarm activation. Following the alarm activation, we have the fight or flight process, okay? And the fight or flight process is really about our body getting ready, the central nervous system, getting ready to do one of two things. We're either gonna fight or we're gonna run. And during that fight or flight, we have an increase in heart rate, muscle tension, increase in our respiratory status. We have a physical reaction because we are preparing to do one of those two things. Following the fight or flight, we also have this memory encoding process. And this process, it's kind of like a camera, and our hippocampus really does a nice job, unfortunately, of memorizing everything about the alarm, the fight or flight reaction, and everything about that situation. Everything, down to the details of the colors that you saw, the people that were there, the smell in the room, everything. And it is a snapshot, and that is deeply encoded through the hippocampus. And we have to think about that. So when we have a perceived threat, not only do we have a neural pathway that we're always going to walk, we're going to have a set of encoded memories that are extremely vivid. Some of them are just snapshots, and others are full pictures of what has occurred. Some of them can be more detailed than others, but they tend to be very vivid. One of the biggest signs of PTSD is flashbacks. And so with that encoding occurring, we have these memories, and they're very invasive, and they can come when any perceived threat is happening. And remember, our amygdala with trauma or repeated trauma, it's overactivated and it's hypersensitive. And it's really this fight to have the amygdala not in such control. But with those memories, it's this balancing act that gets lost. And then the final thing that happens is our body kind of wears out after a traumatic event or through the process. So if our body can no longer fight or flight, what's the option? But to freeze, okay? And that's when everything starts to slow down a little bit. Our heart rate slows down. Our respiratory status slows down. And I think that's the time that our body is trying to heal, but I think it's also the time that our brain is trying to heal. So when our body slows down, we call that the freeze respect. If our mind is slowing down, that's called the dissociative effect. The freezing is really an ancient survival mechanism that everybody has, and I'm sure if you've all been in a very, very difficult situation, if you want to label it as traumatizing, then you can feel the extreme fatigue afterwards, where you just can't do much, you can't think, you can't get your thoughts together, and that's really where your body is trying to regroup and heal itself. And so that survival piece is there, but we have to think about this freeze and when it happens. Is it in a safe environment? Is when my mind shuts down, am I in a safe setting for that to happen? So there is some danger related to this freeze response as well. So those are the steps the amygdala takes.
So when we talk about the ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences, this is the widest, largest study on trauma that's ever been conducted, and it's ongoing. Many of you, I'm sure, have probably heard of it in the past. Some of you probably even know your ACE score. But when we talk about what are we looking at, we're looking at experiences before the age of 18 around abuse, around neglect, and around household dysfunction. And the idea is that these experiences, the more of these we have before age 18, impact us not only in the moment, but those are the messages that start talking to us. You're not good enough. You're not worthy enough. You're not smart enough. You're not whatever. And we know, the data shows us that the more of these we have, the greater likelihood we have to develop physical and mental health problems for the rest of our life. So when we look at what are some of those,
okay, I'll go. So if we look at the body, like diabetes, obesity, Why doesn't high ACE score affect some of these physical problems? Well, we do have a stress system in our body. And with trauma throughout childhood, because this is specific to 18 and under, that stress becomes what they refer to as toxic stress. And our stress system in our body can be very damaging, and it can actually enhance potential chronic diseases such as diabetes, stroke, COPD. So it's really based in that toxic stress. Now, when we look at our mind, the amygdala, remember, is the alarm system. So if a child has trauma or very difficult traumas throughout their first 18 years, or even just one potential trauma, and that child is, again, having that amygdala alarm go off, the prefrontal cortex actually can become underdeveloped in children. And so remember, the prefrontal cortex is where we have all of our executive thinking, all of our problem solving, our morals and our values. So when we have heightened amygdala function, we will have lowered prefrontal cortex function, and that will result in some of these mental health issues, depression, suicide. Substance use is a very big one. Like Dr. McCauley said, PTSD and substance use, very, very connected. And it's based on the change of the brain, what the constant use of the amygdala does in early childhood. And I want to kind of ask, so how does a child adapt when that happens? Anybody have any ideas? When a child is living in a state of survival or in a state of threat all the time or fear, how do you think they adapt to that? Anybody?
Pleasing behaviors.
People pleasing, that's a big one. I know a bunch of therapists right there. Come on, girls. Gentlemen.
They're certainly going to have a harder time, if we expect children all to show up to school each day ready to learn, ready to go. But a child who is struggling with trauma will have a much harder time doing that. They're just trying to survive.
Right, they're not trying to figure out math problems. They're trying to figure out how to get home and not get in trouble or whatever's happening at home. Maybe very hyper-vigilant children, maybe aggressive children. People-pleasing is a big one. Isolation is another one. Not having friends. They don't want to bring anybody home to their home, potentially. And so those skills help them survive through childhood. But how are those skills going to help them in adulthood, right? People-pleasing in adulthood, isolation in adulthood, aggression in adulthood to manage life's challenging issues isn't really productive. And so that's really, these ACE scores can really predict some big challenges.
A lot of what helps us survive as a child, a lot of what helps us cope, right? They end up turning into these really unhelpful, unproductive, bad habits, if you will, as adults. Because if you go back, can you go back to that screen? Right? A lot of these things right here, when I talk about substance abuse with my class, right? The reason we use drugs and alcohol is we want to feel different, hopefully better. Obesity, diabetes, same thing with food, right? I want to feel different, hopefully better. I just want to tune out. I just want to shut down. And, okay, go ahead. So we talk about this chronic anxiety. And I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of what Dr. McCauley said. You're all walking around with an anxiety disorder attached to you, right? Did I miss a call? Did I miss a message? What if it was important, right? We built this system with these tools and these gadgets and this belief that we have to go 100 miles an hour 100% of the time or we're lazy. Remember those voices that Terry was showing us in his demonstration? You're lazy. You're not good enough, right? Those become the neural pathways that get hardened that Christy was talking about. That's the congested highway that you keep hearing over and over and over again. and you keep telling yourself. And so we may end up seeing, the development of symptoms of PTSD, and we also may run into emotional dysregulation, right? I know I'm not the only road rager in here probably, right? Why'd you cut me up, right? What is that about, right? Why is it sometimes we road rage and yell at people and flip them off or whatever, and other times we don't? What's going on with us, right? That's trying to understand this emotional dysregulation that we might have going on. Identity issues, who am I, right? If I define myself by my traumatic past, I'm gonna stay stuck in that traumatic past, and I don't have the opportunity to grow and change. And then finally, we develop those maladaptive coping strategies, whether it's doom scrolling, right? Too much Netflix, if there is such a thing, gambling, drugs, promiscuous sex, whatever it might be. Or maybe it's just trying to find the quickest, easiest way out of doing everything. Hello, AI and computer work and college work, right? So when we talk about how do we help folks move past this, first we have to create a safe place. We have to develop a sense of safety. And here's the scary part. For those of us that have had traumatic experience, we don't know what that feels like. We don't know how to just relax and put our mind at ease and not have those voices tell us you're being lazy, you're worthless. We need to, as Terry showed us in his thing, how do we reprocess these events? Because if you had some bad things happen to you at 5, 6 years old, and you're still living life through those 5 or 6-year-old eyes, that's not going to be productive as adults. Because now, as adults, we can look back on those events and be like, wow, I totally had no control or agency in that situation, and I did the best I could do to survive. And accept that, rather than feeling like I failed. I failed myself, I didn't protect myself, whatever it might be. And I think this one really jumped out at me with Terry's sculpting exercise and something I lament about our society at this point. Terry, could you have done that exercise with just one person?
I could not have.
No, we need each other. We need real connection, right? And we get this false sense of connection, don't we? Oh, you got 500 Facebook friends, or 1,000 followers on whatever, right? How many do you know that'll bail you out of jail? I mean, there's your friend list, right? I always got to have some friends. But we've traded this artificial connection. We've given away our connections to people and our ability to even just have simple conversations. When's the last time you walked up to somebody you don't know and you're just like, hey, I'm John. Nice to meet you. What are some of the things that you like doing? What do you got planned for this weekend? Right? We don't. We just make this passing small talk. So finding ways to build connection. And what that does is that's going to start to empower us. It's going to empower the choices, right? Who do you hang out with? If you hang out with 4 knuckleheads, you're the 5th. If you hang out with 4 driven people who have career ambitions or life ambitions, you're the 5th. Look at the people you surround yourself with and don't hang out with knuckleheads. Not that we all can't have fun and do fun things, but that doesn't mean being a knucklehead, right? If you've got 2 friends that are like, hey, we're tired of being broke college students, let's go rob a bank. No, that's probably not the crowd you want to hang out with. Right.
Well, and just to add briefly to this, I want you to think, many of you may know Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Your basic safety has to be met first before you can imagine trying to make connections when you don't even feel safe around people. So safety is absolutely key in any situation, but especially with individuals who have experienced traumatic events. Safety is not something, like John mentioned, they're familiar with. So they may be in a safe environment and not even know that that's safe because they don't know how to assess that. But we cannot move down those lines of changes that we need to make without that basic sense of safety and spending time in a safe environment.
Okay, and we're gonna just kind of wrap up here because I know we're out of time because Bree's over here like with the big fish hook, she's gonna pull us off stage. But really, my leave for you all is to start establishing connection with real people. Put the phones down, get off the social media, and find ways to connect. And this afternoon at 1:30, over in the Union, 3rd floor, we have the living room conversations, and that's a good place to start. Meeting a room full of people that you don't know, well, not a room full, that might be intimidating, but like 10, right? 10 people you don't know and hear their perspectives, right? You don't have to agree with their perspectives, but you hear them, and that's how you start to build connection. So that's what I would challenge you with and what I'd like to leave you with, so.
You didn't comment on it.
What's that?
You didn't comment on the national.